So this is the last chapter of this book, the debate over legalization. Statement of the problem. Many believe that what you do with your own body, including what you put into it, is your own business. Addressing SUDs with legal sanctions is ineffective. When a government bans certain behaviors or substances, it is attempting to protect the citizens from the consequences of their choices. The United States consumes 2/3 of the world's illicit drugs. The illicit drug trade is at $266 billion each year in the United States. In addition to further billions spent a year to fight the war on drugs. The war on drugs, an ongoing national disaster, one of 9. The war on drugs has raged for the better part of a century, driven by irrational beliefs rather than the destructive nature of drugs. Subtle racial undertones, possession of powder cocaine results in more lenient sentences than possession of an equal amount of crack cocaine. And powdered cocaine is most prevalent among the white middle-class Americans, whereas crack cocaine is more prevalent in minority inner cities. The fantasy of the war on drugs, based on elimination of illicit compounds through destruction of raw materials. Interdiction of drugs being shipped into this country. Legal sanctions against those who engage in the use of the substance deemed illegal by the government. Treatment of those addicted to those compounds. Step 1. Elimination of raw materials. If you eliminate the raw materials, the product cannot be produced. The reality is far different. Many compounds are manufactured from precursor chemicals that are legally obtained. For example, methamphetamine can be produced from ephedrine that is derived from pseudoephedrine found in cold remedies. Step 2. Interdiction. The lesson of history, Prohibition. The Great Experiment. Based on the theory that many of society's ills were caused by alcohol, so the non-medical use of alcohol was outlawed. Binge drinking was increased and people turned from beer to liquor. Alcohol use did decline during Prohibition, but an entire underground market for alcohol developed as well, leading to increase in crime rates. Following the start of Prohibition, the homicide rate in the United States increased 4-fold, while other forms of crime increased in frequency by 24%. Recent decades have seen interdiction efforts lead to what is known as the law of unintended consequences. Step 3. Criminalization. Manufactured criminals. One is deemed a criminal simply by virtue of having a compound designed illicit. Individuals with an SUD are then forced to use their drug of choice under conditions that contribute to healthcare problems. Paradoxically, these consequences of the criminalization of certain compounds are then used to justify keeping them illegal. Mandatory sentencing. In the 1950s, Congress passed the Bogues Act, established minimum sentence for narcotic dealers. Sentencing Reform Act of 1984 again embraced mandatory prison sentences, denied first-time offenders early parole. Prison sentences soon overwhelmed. Prison system soon overwhelmed. The United States has 5% of the world's population, but 25% of the prison population. The forfeiture fiasco. Possessions of any amount of illegal substance was grounds for criminal prosecution under these zero-tolerance statuses. Constitutional prohibition against unlawful search and seizure was dismissed in favor of laws that allowed for confiscation based on mere suspicion. Some police departments now depend on money and property seized under forfeiture laws for at least part of their operating budget. And then stage 4 was treatment. The total expenditure for drug rehabilitation is estimated to be $50 billion from state and federal governments and $5 billion from insurance companies. Incarceration has been estimated to cost 2 to 10 times what rehabilitation costs. However, research finds that every $1 spent on treatment can save a community between $4 and $50 in various expenses. The reality of the war on drugs. The war on drugs has failed. The moralism that was the foundation of the war on drugs has failed to sway the battle. Over 50 years, the war has cost over $2.5 trillion. Other consequences of the prohibition against drug abuse. Laws block research into potentially useful medical applications. The law and mortality. In the modern war on drugs, federal and state authorities have applied legal sanctions against individuals who wish to use any of the long list of chemicals, or in the case of alcohol, to use it beyond certain limits. In the early 21st century, the line between legitimate medical purposes and recreational substance use has become rather uncertain. Thus, the war on drugs might be viewed as a war on those who attempt to alter their state of consciousness in socially unacceptable ways. Debate over medical marijuana. The debate on this issue has led to the multiple of often conflicting state laws that prohibit all marijuana use or allow it for medical conditions to those allowing recreational use. Never mind the continued status of illegal under federal law. In reality, the medicalization of marijuana would simply place it on an equal footing with other accepted pharmaceuticals and allow researchers to identify components in marijuana that might be of value to healthcare professionals. And then the last thing is legalization of marijuana. In the Netherlands, marijuana use is acceptable. Sorry about that. And the individual is allowed to have small amounts of marijuana for personal use. If it were purchased in a government-approved coffee house, there is a tax placed on marijuana, providing a source of revenue. Proponents of the legalization of marijuana point out that the legalization of marijuana, even with strict controls such as those put in place in the Netherlands, would remove a source of income from what is loosely called organized crime. Anyway, that's it for this video. Thank you for listening and for the whole series, and I hope it helps somebody. Bye.